Chapter 1. The Ashes of Home. The wind carried the scent of peat smoke and iron, tanging the air with fire and blood. Bran lay face down in the mud, his chest pressed to the cold, wet earth, and each breath tore at him, as though his lungs had been carved from stone. Around him, the rushes burned low, smoldering embers curling like the fingers of ghosts. His eyes, swollen and raw, traced the ruins of his home, the charred beams of the roof, the blackened walls, the collapsed hearth where his children had once laughed. Now there was only silence, broken by the distant call of crows and the harsh trampling of the English soldiers as they rode away, leaving him for dead. Pain lanced through his side, a sharp reminder of the spear that had torn him from life. His legs would not carry him. His arms trembled beneath the weight of grief and exhaustion. He tried to rise, but the world spun like a storm-tossed sea, and the taste of iron coated his mouth. Bran's thoughts were muddled. Fragments of screams and cries, the sound of splintered wood, the last desperate words of his wife, all fading into a hollow ache inside him. He had known fear, yes, but never the cold, empty terror of knowing that those he loved most had been ripped from the world, and that the hand of fate had singled him out only to mock his survival. He crawled inch by inch toward the edge of the hill where the standing stones jutted from the earth, weathered and ancient. They had always seemed to hum, a faint vibration beneath the soles of his feet, a memory older than the clans, older than the churches that now dotted the countryside. His grandmother had whispered of them in the long nights before he left for the fields, speaking of curses laid upon the land, of spirits that walked when men were too blind or too proud to see. "Respect the stones," she had said. "Do not wake what sleeps beneath them." Bran had laughed then, foolish with youth, but now that laughter felt like the echo of another lifetime. The ground beneath him was cold, sodden with the storm of his blood and sweat. Each movement made his vision swim. Each breath rasped in his chest like the wind through hollow reeds. Yet something deeper drove him forward, not hope nor faith, but a single consuming thought: vengeance. The English lord who had sent his men, the cruel hand that had shattered his life, must pay. If Bran had the strength of 100 men, he would tear the world down to claim it. Even now, broken and bleeding, the fire of fury surged through him, mingling with the pain until he was a living instrument of grief. At last he reached the stones, the largest of them dark as wet iron, slick with moss and age. He fell to his knees, resting his palms against their cold surface. The stone pressed into his fingers, hard and unyielding, and the vibration beneath it thrummed through him like the pulse of the earth itself. "Let me avenge them," he whispered, his voice a hoarse rasp, carrying across the bogs and reaching into the night. "Let me strike down the hand that destroyed my family. Let me live long enough to see them pay." The wind stilled, and a silence deeper than death fell across the hill. Bran's eyelids fluttered as the weight of the night pressed down, and he felt himself slipping. Not into sleep, no, this was not the rest of the living. This was something darker, something final, a descent into the blackness where light could not reach. His hands sank into the wet earth, clutching the stones as though they were the last anchors of his life. And in that moment, as the last spark of warmth left his chest, the ground beneath him shivered. A voice, not of man, not of beast, whispered through the stones, rising from the deep and curling around him like smoke. It was neither cruel nor kind, neither offering nor denying. It was something that had waited, patient and endless, for the blood of the living to call it forth. Bran's breath caught, his chest tightening as the world seemed to tilt and fold inward. The shadows stretched, the wind stilled, and the embers around him flickered once, twice, and then died. He felt the cold seep into his bones, deeper than the chill of the wind, deeper than the spear that had pierced him. And yet, beneath that cold, there was a stir, a pulse, faint but insistent, like a heartbeat not his own. Bran tried to scream, but the sound was caught in his throat. His vision dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again, until the shapes of the burned home, the crows, and the blackened earth melted into a haze of light and shadow. A raven cried somewhere far off, a single, mournful note that seemed to echo from the stones themselves. Bran's fingers sank further into the wet, ancient rock, and the whispering deep beneath it rose, growing louder, filling the hollows of his mind. And then, as his heart stilled and the last warmth fed his body, Bran O'Catane understood one terrible truth. He was no longer alone. The wind shifted. The bog moaned. The earth below trembled. And the darkness answered. Chapter 2. The Awakening, Revised. Bran's eyes opened to darkness that was not night. It pressed against him from all sides, thick and cool, yet alive, as though the earth itself had wrapped him in a cloak of shadow. He gasped, and the sound startled him, though it was not pain he felt. Not truly, but an alien awareness stirring in his chest. His wounds were gone. The spear, the burns, the broken ribs, all had vanished as if they had never been. In their place was a weight, a pressing hunger that throbbed with each pulse of the unnatural darkness surrounding him. The standing stones rose above him like silent sentinels, their rough surfaces slick with ancient moss and dew, yet they seemed taller, more immense than he had ever remembered. The fog of the bog had thickened into a veil of silver, curling around the monoliths and around him, as if welcoming him back into a world that was neither fully living nor fully dead. Bran tried to rise, but the sensation in his legs was strange, unfamiliar. Strength surged through him, sudden and impossible. Yet with it came an aching, gnawing emptiness, a void that demanded more than it had any right to ask. A sound came from the distance, subtle at first, like the flutter of wings over the moor. Then closer, sharper, a raucous cry that seemed to pierce the fog itself. A raven, black as a sliver of night, alighted upon one of the stones, its eyes glinting with intelligence. Bran felt its gaze like a blade across his mind, probing, questioning, acknowledging. He understood then, though not by thought but by instinct, the creature that had touched him, that had risen with him from the brink of death, had given him not life but a thread of something older, stranger, hungrier than any mortal blood. He tested his voice, whispering his own name. It emerged as a low, resonant sound, richer and darker than he had known. Then he laughed a sound hollow and bitter, but not entirely devoid of wonder. He rose to his knees, then to his feet, feeling the mud yield beneath his weight, feeling the air sharpen against his skin. Every detail of the bog was clearer than memory had ever allowed. The curve of the stones, the shimmer of water across the moss, the distant glimmer of the moon on the far horizon. He could smell the peat, the ash, the faint decay of things that had lain for centuries in the bog, and beneath it all, an undercurrent of life that was not life of hunger waiting to be sated. Bran walked, at first unsteadily, then with a fluid grace that startled him. Each step was precise, deliberate, yet instinctual, as if he remembered paths he had never traveled, and with each movement, The hunger inside him leapt, sharp and cold, pulling at his will, but he did not yet strike. Not yet. There would be no reckless surrender to it. First, understanding. First, control. First, the taste of what awaited him. From the shadows, he watched the ruined home smoldering in the moonlight, smoke curling lazily into the sky. The bodies of those he had loved, his wife, his children, lay still and silent, witnesses to his failure. For a moment, grief, sharp and terrible, tore through him. He fell to his knees, pressing his hands to the cold earth, and the darkness wrapped around him, not as death, but as a mantle. He felt the old whispering in his blood again, the words that were not words, but understanding. Rise, strike, endure. And he did. Bran rose fully to his feet, taller, stronger, sharper. His chest no longer ached. His eyes no longer wept. Yet the sorrow remained, hollowing him from within, entwined with the hunger that now defined him. He turned back toward the smoldering ruins, and though the fog cloaked the land, he could see the paths that had led his enemies through the bog, feel the echo of their footsteps, as though imprinted upon the earth itself. A hunger, patient and cold, coursed through him. It demanded satisfaction, yes, but also purpose. He felt the pulse of the stones beneath his feet, the ancient power that had awakened him. And the thought of vengeance no longer belonged merely to a man. It belonged to something older, something that had waited, timeless, beneath Ireland's soil. Bran was not merely alive. Bran was a reckoning. The raven cried again, sharp and commanding, and Bran lifted his face toward the moon, its silver light brushing the sharp planes of his cheek. His lips parted, and a low sound left his throat, half laugh, half growl, half prayer. It carried across the bog, across the ruins, across the invisible line of the pale, a herald of what had returned. The darkness shifted, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to pause. Then the hunger whispered, a voice older than kings, older than empires, and Bran understood fully. His vengeance had only begun, and the night was listening. Chapter 3. The First Strike, Revised. The fog lay heavy over the bog as Bran moved, silent as shadow, his senses sharpened to every whisper of movement. Each step carried him closer to the faint lights of a distant encampment, the soldiers who had destroyed his home, the instruments of his grief. He did not stumble. The mud and broken ground yielded to him as though welcoming his passage. The night seemed to bend, to pause in his presence, and even the crows fell silent, circling high and watching from the dark treetops. Bran's hunger hummed beneath his ribs, a relentless rhythm that demanded attention. It was not the hunger of a man for food, nor even the deep ache of grief. It was older, colder, more precise, a consuming need to feed, to strike, to assert dominion over the blood that had been spilled. And yet beneath it all lingered the sorrow of loss, a shadow that refused to be quenched. He had been remade, but he had not forgotten. He crouched behind a rise of peat and watched the camp. A small cluster of tents, poorly lit by flickering torches, revealed the soldiers laughing, clanking armor and sharing drink. At the center, on a raised platform of earth, stood the man responsible for his ruin, Sir Thomas Harrowe, draped in the red and gold of the pale, his gaunt face pale under the torchlight, his gaze sharp, unyielding. The Lord laughed, a harsh, brittle sound, unaware that the night held a reckoning. Bran's hands clenched, nails biting into his palms, and the hunger stirred with a voice all his own. It whispered in the rhythm of his heart, guiding him. Approach, observe, choose. He understood with an instinct that was neither learned nor taught. The first strike must be precise, deliberate, a warning that reverberated beyond the men before him. He moved like the mist itself, flowing, silent, unseen. A soldier shifted near the fire, the glow catching his blade. Bran's eyes locked on him, and in that instant the hunger within him leapt, sharp and cold, pulling at his will. But he did not strike. Not yet. There would be no reckless slaughter. First fear, then understanding, and lastly, the taste of control. The man would see what stalked the darkness and know the pale was not safe, that death could wear no uniform, answer no banner, and fear no law. Bran's thoughts drifted briefly to the stones, to the ancient presence that had called him back from the brink. They hummed still beneath his feet, and he felt their approval, a subtle confirmation of the path he had begun to walk. It was not merely vengeance he sought. It was justice beyond the reach of mortal law, a reckoning that would mark every foot of the English march across Irish soil. And yet beneath it all, the memory of his family's faces remained vivid, a tether to what he had been, a reminder that the monster within him must be wielded, not embraced entirely. From the shadows, a smaller figure, cloaked, stepped cautiously near the edge of the encampment. Bran's pulse quickened. The figure paused, eyes reflecting the torchlight, and for a heartbeat, he thought it might be another survivor, another victim of Harrowe's cruelty. But the figure knelt, laying a bundle of herbs and stones at the edge of a ruined fence. A whisper of words, old and low, drifted toward him, a song, perhaps, or a prayer. Bran did not know. What he knew was that the moment was fleeting, that soon the encampment would feel the first ripple of his wrath, and the figure would vanish or bear witness, or perhaps both. The hunger whispered again, impatient now, urging him forward, guiding him toward the reckoning he had been made to deliver. He rose fully, shadows cloaking his form, and began to move along the edge of the bog, toward the careless campfires and the men who had spilled his blood. The wind carried the scent of smoke, meat, and iron. The night carried the silence of things unseen. Bran had walked this world once as a man. Now he walked it as something else entirely. And the Pale would soon learn that the darkness could kill in ways that law and lance never could. Above him, the raven called again, sharp and commanding, and Bran whispered beneath his breath, "A promise as cold and endless as the bog itself. I have returned. I will see them pay." And the night waited, patient and hungry as Bran stepped into it. Chapter 4. The First Hunt. The encampment lay silent now, though not empty. Bran had circled it in the fog, unseen, a shadow among shadows, tracing the paths that led to the men who had killed his family. The air was sharp with smoke and iron, and he could smell every heartbeat, every pulse, every stir of movement, as though it were written upon the wind. The hunger inside him sang, patient yet insistent, urging him forward. He had been given life again, and it demanded payment. A lone sentry walked the edge of the camp, the torchlight flickering against his armor. Bran watched him, noting the pattern of his steps, the slight sway of his body, the way his breath misted in the cold night. The man was ordinary, mortal, fragile. Yet he would learn too late that ordinary meant nothing to what now stalked the bog. Bran stepped forward, silent, his movements fluid as the fog curling around the stones. When he struck, it would be sudden, like the night itself rising to claim what it desired. The sentry passed too close, and Bran's hand shot out. He grasped the man's shoulder, and the world seemed to sharpen around them, the fog pressing in as the man stiffened in surprise. Bran's eyes glinted, dark and unearthly, and the soldier's mouth opened in a choked cry. Bran's voice, low and strange, flowed over him like a current of ice. "The Pale will not protect you tonight." The man froze, confusion and fear wrestling in his gaze. Then, with a strength that was not wholly his own, Bran lifted him effortlessly, pressing him to the ground. The soldier struggled, gasping, but Bran did not release him. Hunger pulsed beneath his ribs, thrumming like a drum in the dark. He did not yet strike, not fully. He wanted the others to see, to understand the shadow that had returned to walk among them. A torch flared to the left, and 2 more soldiers appeared, drawn by the commotion. Bran dropped the first silently, a shadow swallowing him, and the men froze, the firelight illuminating eyes wide with disbelief. He stepped from the fog, each movement deliberate, slow, graceful, and yet impossibly fast. They saw him fully then, the pale figure, taller and sharper than any man, with eyes that glimmered like a storm-tossed lake. The raven cried above them, circling high, a black omen against the silver moon. The men raised weapons, shouting, but their fear was immediate, tangible. Bran advanced. Each step seemed to bend the fog around him, each breath carrying the promise of reckoning. The hunger within him stirred, teasing, pulling, demanding, and yet beneath it all was the man who had loved, who had lost, who had been broken in the mud of his home. That man whispered faintly, almost lost, "Do not let them take everything from you again." A clash of steel rang out as the first man lunged. Bran sidestepped, impossibly quick, feeling the fabric of the air, the pull of the ground beneath his feet. The sword clanged against nothing as he passed, and the soldier stumbled, fear consuming him. Bran did not strike with rage, not yet. He struck with intent, with precision, teaching, warning. The hunger hummed, pleased, but his mind remained his own, at least for now. The second soldier faltered as Bran approached, and the first scrambled back toward the fire, eyes wide with terror. Bran spoke again, low, resonant, words carrying across the night. "Leave. Tell your master I'm here. Tell him the shadows are not empty." They hesitated, then ran, stumbling through the fog toward the campfires, abandoning the posts, abandoning their pride. Bran let them go, the echo of their terror feeding him as much as the hunger in his veins. He did not chase. He had made his point. The first act of vengeance had been delivered quiet, swift, unstoppable. Bran lifted his face to the moon, silver light tracing the sharp planes of his cheeks. The fog swirled, curling like smoke around him, and he felt the stones beneath the bog pulse in quiet approval. The hunger thrummed beneath his ribs, a reminder of what he had become, and he whispered to it softly, a promise and a warning entwined. "This is only the beginning." From the edge of the camp, he glimpsed the shadowed figure again, the one who had laid herbs and stones, kneeling and watching. Bran did not approach. He acknowledged it with a glance, a nod, understanding that the night had more to teach, and that he would need guidance beyond rage if he were to endure. The fog thickened, the wind shifted, and the night seemed to lean in closer. Bran stepped back into the shadows, unseen once more, a predator among the reeds. He would return. He would strike again, and Sir Thomas Harrowe, perched in his encampment, would learn that the darkness he had sown was now walking, hunting, and awake. Bran vanished into the night, leaving only the echo of footsteps, the cry of the raven, and the promise of vengeance lingering in the cold bog air. Chapter 5. Shadows Among the Reeds. The night had grown older, thick and quiet when Bran returned to the bog. The fog clung to him like a second skin, muffling sound and bending light, concealing him as he moved with a predator's grace. The taste of vengeance lingered on his tongue, sharp and satisfying, yet it was not enough. Each heartbeat of the English soldiers echoed in his mind like a drum, calling him onward. He would strike again and again, until the pale trembled with the fear it had long refused to acknowledge. Bran crouched on a rise, observing the tracks of Harrow's men. The paths they had taken, the careless gestures of patrols, the way the torches swayed, all were as clear to him now as if the world had been etched in his vision. His senses, heightened beyond any mortal measure, revealed the patterns of life and death alike. The bog, the reeds, the stones beneath his feet, all whispered their secrets, guiding him toward opportunity, toward retribution. Oh, he paused, listening to the wind whisper through the rushes. The hunger stirred, faint but insistent, reminding him that what he had become demanded more than mere justice. It demanded blood. The thought made him shiver, but he pushed it aside. He would not yet allow the monster to rule. His human mind would temper the beast. For now he was Bran, the Avenger, the shadow stalking the pale, and he would remain so at least long enough to confront Harrow himself. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a lone soldier returning from patrol, eyes scanning the fog. Bran stepped silently among the reeds, muscles coiled like the tension before a strike. The soldier paused, uncertain, sensing something amiss, but unable to place it. Bran watched, then moved closer, feeling the hunger rise, the pulse in his chest quicken. Yet instead of striking immediately, he circled, watching, learning. The terror that would come was a tool, a weapon itself. When Bran finally acted, it was a blur of motion. The soldier barely had time to shout before he found himself pressed to the ground, the cold weight of Bran's strength pinning him. Fear flooded the man's eyes, wide and uncomprehending, as Bran leaned close, whispering, his voice low and resonant. "Tell your fellows that the pale does not belong to them. Tell them that the shadows are patient, and that they walk among the reeds tonight." Bran released him, letting him flee into the fog. The man's screams echoed briefly, then were swallowed by the night. Bran watched him go, the hunger inside him, surging with satisfaction, yet tempered by purpose. This was the path he had chosen to strike, to warn, to teach fear before rage. Each act was a lesson, and each lesson brought him closer to Harrow. From the edge of the camp, the cloaked figure appeared again, kneeling silently among the reeds. Bran acknowledged it with a slow nod, understanding that guidance would be necessary, that the old power beneath the stones had not returned him wholly to life without intent. He did not approach. The figure would remain a witness, a marker, or perhaps a guide. Bran's focus was elsewhere, on the paths, the patrols, the heart of the pale. He moved through the fog like a shadow, a predator unbound. The hunger pulsed, whispering its promises, yet Bran controlled it, bending it to his will. Each step, each silent movement, carried him closer to his purpose. Harrow's laughter, once distant, would soon echo in fear, and Bran would ensure it was so. Above, the raven circled once more, black wings slicing the silvered night. Its cry carried across the bog, a herald of what had returned, a signal that the darkness now walked with intent. Bran's eyes glinted in the fog, a reflection of the hunger, the sorrow, and the vengeance coiled within him. The hunt had begun. The pale would tremble, and Bran would be the shadow that taught it how.